Hello, Podechumens, and welcome to another episode of the Podechesis Podcast, a podcast about what Christians believe and why it matters. I'm Brett Maddox, and once again, we're joined by your very best friends, Alan Kaysen and Jim Morrow. How you guys doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. Jim, you doing okay?
I'm going to tell you guys, this is as cold as South Georgia gets, and I'm about to make an igloo.
It's 65 degrees outside.
I'm going to pull out my parka and my mittens.
Okay. And today we are excited because we've got a very special guest. Dr. Timothy Tennent, president of Asbury Theological Seminary, is with us. Dr. Tennent, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and we've had plenty of snow and ice up here, It's been amazing.
Yeah.
Talk about sticking my foot in my mouth.
Yeah, Jim's talking about how cold it is. And
yeah. Shoot Jim down
ice.
when we're all in shorts down here, and he's complaining about how cold it is. I don't know what's going on. Once again, feel free, Podechumens, to hit us up on social media. At Podechesis is where you can find us on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter. And as always, leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And as a reminder, we are a part of the Spirit and Truth Podcasting Network, so check them out at spiritandtruth.life. All right, Dr. Tennent, we are so glad to have you with us, and we want to talk about catechism with you. As our listeners know, we've been going through John Wesley's revision of the Westminster Shorter Catechism for over 18 months now, and we are kind of getting towards the end of that. We just finished the 10 Commandments. And so one of the things for us is this has been really good for us three, to kind of go through these central tenets of the faith, if you will. And you just published Foundations of the Christian Faith, a resource for catechesis and disciple making. And, we want to just talk about that and see, why did you do this? What is it about catechism that excites you? And why'd you publish this? I guess I should say before we get into that, you're a widely published author on many, many different things. Some of my favorite personal books of yours is like Christianity at the Religious Roundtable. I think it's just a fantastic book. And the Theology in World Christian Context, or that book, and some others. But yeah, why catechism? What is it about catechism that excites you, and why'd you publish this?
Well, Brett, Alan, and Jen, let me just say I'm delighted to be here. It's great to be part of your podcast. And I heard there was such a thing as a Podechesis podcast.
Yes.
I thought, wow, there's a new day has dawned on the church. What an amazing concept. So you didn't even have to ask me. I would have begged to be on your show because I just can't believe it. But anyway, you did ask me. I'm honored to be here because I do think catechesis is important. The church has always, had some kind of way of passing the faith on. As you know, those sacred words in Paul's that Paul does in Corinthians. It's what I received, I passed on. Right, paradidoka in Greek. And I feel like that today's church has been kind of on its back heels about it. We used to rely upon the culture to help us, and all that's kind of faded away. And the church is really desperately in need of catechesis. So this book is trying to help provide a practical resource for the church and how to train a new believer. This helps both people that are coming to the faith through family formation, but also just new believers that join the church, like in a new class or new members class, or whatever. It's meant to kind of help the church in that way.
It's awesome. One of the things I noticed is that this is not like a regular confirmation work or even a regular catechesis work, because this tends to be real holistic. Like it's not just the mind. You're not just asking questions and giving answers, and it's not just certain ways of act. Like you include every bit of this what is it? I think you said like a doctrine and
ethics and ordinances.
And ordinances, yeah. And so that's a big piece to this, that it's not just one part. It seems to be really holistic.
Well, that's true. I think if you go back through history and you ask what is the core of catechesis, despite all the amazing diversity in the church over the years in terms of all kinds of things we talk about, fight about, whatever else, what has been amazingly consistent is that the core of catechesis has been shockingly similar across Roman Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant traditions, and even today in more of the free church type setup. So the Lord's Prayer, the Ten Commandments, Apostles' Creed has been kind of a constant in catechesis. The changes that I made, I still did all of that, but I did some things that I think were more contextual for, what pastors like you are facing, like questions you're actually getting at churches related to, the body and toward certain ethical issues, et cetera. So that was important to me. I also did something which, as Wesleyans, you'll appreciate, which is I don't think ever been done before, but I included a hymn at the end of every section. My wife was, God bless my wife, she wrote a hymn for every section to kind of gather it together, because Wesleyans sing their theology. I wanted to say, you know what, this is not just about, the point you made, Brett, not just about memorizing stuff. The third change I made was that if you look at the traditional catechesis, it was always just question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, and kids would memorize it and spout it back. And what I found is today, the parents had no idea themselves what this was all about. So my 30 questions thing, which is designed to do over a month's time with a family, comes with more of an explanation about what the answer really means. So those are some changes from traditional catechesis.
That's awesome.
I love your Wesleyan emphasis here too. You've got an entire section on holiness.
That's right.
I love it.
Oh yeah.
I know. I think one of the this is where I'm speaking to the choir here, but one of the problems with the Reformation, as wonderful as it was that it tended to be so Christocentric that, and God bless them for that, but it did tend to move us away from the Trinitarian understanding of how God works at all parts of the Trinity. And it also tended to basically collapse salvation into justification. So therefore you get people that are justified but not sanctified. So this does try to breathe new life into the whole great meaning of salvation, that we're justified, we're sanctified, and someday we'll be glorified.
You got me singing there. So I love this, written as a tool for the church, not just to talk about why catechism is important, but for people to actually use. And I think that's just a wonderful experience. So I've got the book. I love it. What are some ways that you envision people engaging the material and using it? And why would it be a good resource for people in the local church?
Well, that's, I don't know if you know Andrew Dragos, but Andrew Dragos works for us at Seedbed. And he's the one that actually came to me and said, I would love to make this book a little more user-friendly by including all the marginal scriptural references, the questions, and all of that. You can see the book has that format. And he did all that as a way of helping this book become a little more user-friendly. But the good thing about this book is it's a big book. But pastors use this book in a wide variety of ways. So some pastors will choose to preach through the Apostles' Creed, for example. As a sermon series. I've had a lot of pastors tell me they're preaching through the Apostles' Creed. Then they may say, well, the section on the 30 questions, that's perfect for families at home with their kids. Hey, every night we're going to do one question before we go to bed. And whereas some of the questions on holiness might be really good for a small group setting. And so this is not the kind of book where you have to march through the book from page 1 to page 200 and whatever. I mean, you could, but it's really meant to be kind of a menu of things that pastors could use as they see fit in a larger plan of catechesis. Because some churches have 3 weeks, some have 6 weeks, some have one nice coffee event in a Starbucks.
And what we want you to do is we want to make sure you're supposed to show up and tithe, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's the only catechesis
we all remember at General Conference when they try to pass that rule that says pastors could not keep somebody from joining if they wanted to. Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
And so we're fighting it with the headwinds against us in terms of what can you expect? And so I've tried to learn what historically the church did. And then look what's happening today. Of course, there's a big gap. So we're trying to figure out how to get that gap closed a little bit.
One of my just kind of a funny side story here. You were talking about preachers preaching through the Apostles' Creed. Dr. Tennent, I don't know if you remember this or not, but a number of years ago, you came and preached here at St. Luke when Robert Beckham was the senior pastor, and we were going through we were going through Apostles' Creed series at the time. And the Sunday you were with us just happened to fall on he descended to the dead, which in United Methodist circles, they go, where did that come from?
Yeah,
and our Presbyterian friends, well, it's been there the whole time. So anyway, so we decided, Robert and I decided in our, why not let the esteemed president of a seminary handle the harrowing of hell sermon? And you did a great job with that. But I just thought, man, you coming in doing the visiting preaching, that's not quite what visiting preachers want on their plate. But you did a very good job.
I'll have to tell Robert, what were you thinking?
Oh, that was
funny. That when I became a UM pastor, my DS pulled me aside and said, there's two kinds of appointments in the conference. There's a regular appointments and there's punishment appointments. These are the place they send you like no one wants to go. So I'm giving you a punishment appointment. He was trying to laugh about it, but it was a little tough call.
Yeah,
anyway, so that y'all gave me a punishment sermon.
That's what they're right.
I love it.
What you do to visiting preachers that you like, okay,
that's exactly, this is just test them out.
Test them out.
Yeah.
I love the renewed emphasis on catechesis and teaching and passing on the faith for two reasons. One is the idea that people will pick up something, period.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think that we've lost the game on is we've outsourced it to, say, the popular section of a Christian bookstore, what people see on TV, down to stereotypes. But another thing that we're doing, and I think, Dr. Tennent, you're doing so well coming from an academic setting, writing practical work, is helping to bridge the gap that theology matters.
Right.
Theology matters for people in the pews, people in their lives. And it's a really beautiful thing. We're finding our church members, our listeners, pastors across our conference who are engaging in this kind of work with us are finding that theology is not a head exercise. The things of God are not just about getting knowledge in. It's really helps us to behold the Lord, and behold what it is to be saved through and through. So we've got, I think we've maybe been on the sidelines long enough, trying to get people through our new members classes, that we've got a little heavy lifting to do.
That's a great point, Jim. I think it's just well said. I felt the same thing as a pastor, and we have. I think I can kind of compare it to the movement from the Temple Mount to Mars Hill. That the Temple Mount, the Jewish, the kind of Jewish kind of conception of the temple and everything was a place of cultural stability, divine revelation. People gather to hear God's word expounded, etc. But now we're actually more like Mars Hill. We're like Paul on the outcropping, a place of disputation, a place of dialogue, a place of people who want to raise their disagreements. And I think the church has to be able to kind of navigate that distance, which is a quite significant one, between a culture which, broadly speaking, embraced Christian ethics. Even if they weren't Christians, they broadly accepted kind of Judeo-Christian framework of life, to a sometimes outright hostility toward Christian values. And certainly, as you said, Jim, absolutely a lot of stereotyping of Christians that goes on, where we are viewed as just a bunch of angry people who just are against everything. And so I do believe that that's one of the great callings of pastors today. And I really admire pastors for that reason, because this is not an easy, this is a huge, huge task before us all.
So in your book, a part of the ethics section is you include the 10 Commandments. And so we literally just finished going over the 10 Commandments one by one. The Shorter Catechism, Westminster Shorter Catechism, I think does a pretty good job of talking about the 10 Commandments, what they prohibit, what they allow, so forth and so forth. So we tried to answer the question, why do they matter? Why do they still matter? Why? And so I guess the question for you is, why do they still matter? Why did you choose to include them in this catechism?
Yeah, great question, Dallin. The 10 Commandments, and this is, of course, not only a Wesleyan perspective, though it's particularly Wesleyan, but it's true, actually should be true for the whole church. The Christ's coming did not, abolish the law, but it demonstrated another way of having how the law interacts with the Christians. So the gospel does not negate the fact that the Ten Commandments are still binding on us. In fact, as you know, the Sermon on the Mount actually deepens them. Adultery gets deepened to lust, and murder to anger, etc. So what we actually find is that the Christ becomes a new lawgiver, and so we do have to go from the eventually the point where we realize that to live a life of holiness cannot be done without being filled with the Holy Spirit and having your life reoriented toward God and toward the Lord. So that's a crucial point, but you can't actually get there until you first establish the moral framework of the biblical worldview. And this is where Richard Hayes and so many other great writers have made this clear. And I really believe that. And so the Ten Commandments has always been a clear part of catechesis. So for a child to learn, you shall not steal, you shall not commit adultery, etc. These are really good values for Christians. And that's a very different question than saying, in what way does the Holy Spirit empower us to live out the law? Mm-hmm. And so some Christians today think that the Christians are anti-law. What we're anti is we're anti-law divorced from the empowerment of the Spirit. And so I think that's a important distinction. So we still love the Ten Commandments and think that honoring your father and your mother is still a very good idea.
Yeah, amen on that. Yes.
Especially if you want a long life.
That's right. I sure am glad Charlton Heston wrote those 10 Commandments.
Yeah, no, right. Yeah.
I'm kidding. Right. We found a lot of beautiful to meditate on those commandments. They seem so simple. It's been a beautiful experience. And I remember you've written elsewhere about them as well. And so I'm just thankful that for this work to be in here.
Yeah.
Well, I was actually really talking to an unbeliever recently, and we were in a conversation, in a car play, a mechanic's place, and we're chatting away. And at some point he turned to me and said, this is just a kind of random man in a mechanic shop. And he said to me, well, he said, that doesn't really jive with the Big Ten, he said. I said, what? It doesn't really work out with the Big Ten. I realized he was referring to the Ten Commandments. He still had this big notion that, God has put out 10 things there and you should avoid those 10 things.
That's hilarious.
That's still kind of, the culture does seem to be aware of it a little bit, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. So
I love go ahead, Rob,
go ahead, Jim. Go ahead.
No, well, I love through Asbury Seminary and through the related Seedbed organization, and just the heart of the people of the Asbury community is really a renewing spirit. And there's a lot of passion around how Methodism and the Wesleyan way of being a Christian really has something to say to the world and has a huge place in the renewal of people's lives. And so with that on the horizon and what it feels like the Spirit of God is doing, and this emphasis on catechism and really learning our faith, what do you see as the relationship between those two things? Because I see them come, and I think you mentioned this, they're coming together at a very similar time, where you have this emerging passion for Methodism out of maybe some difficulties in various bodies of the church, and a passion for catechism. What do you think is the relationship to that, and do they go hand in hand as we move forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. That's a mystery. I do think that history shows and Scripture shows that when we go through trials, we become more open. I think Peter Gregg, that wrote God on Mute, makes the point in his book that he said that they did a study of the pandemic, and they found out that every time that the bad news was announced about the pandemic or whatever, number of cases or deaths or whatever it was, the positivity rate, someone did a track on Google searches on the word prayer, and it was like a huge correlation. There's been a just dramatic increase in people's interest in prayer during the last 2 years. And I do think that there is a strange correlation, the fact that when our lives are going well, or frankly our denomination's going well, or when things are going well, we tend to get more lax.
Mm-hmm.
And when we go through difficult or trials, and sometimes we go through painful experiences, and I've been through some very painful things in my life. And when those things have happened to me, I look back on them and say, I wouldn't trade it, because I feel like those things drove me closer to the Lord. And even coming to Asbury, even on a positive side, I love being at Asbury, but when I came here, I guess my second year, I realized, wow, I don't have the spirituality or spiritual depth or whatever you want to say to be the president of the Asbury Seminary. I just don't have it. I had the spiritual capacity to be a professor at Gordon Conwell or whatever I was before.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized I needed new capacities, and I realized I either had to, maybe I'm saying more than I should here, but I either had to get out or I had to go deeper. I had to go dive deeper with the Lord. Mm. My wife and I decided to really change our plans, and we decided to get up an hour earlier, and we said that we start with a 150 journey. This is a catechesis. We decided to do a 150-day journey through the Psalms for 150 days and spend an hour a day on a Psalm. I get up really early and just focus on a Psalm for one day. We started that in 2012, and we never stopped to this day.
Wow.
Including this morning. If I'm traveling, we do on the phone. We never don't quit doing that, because we found that it brought us to a deeper place, and it gave me the capacity to serve in the position I'm in now. And I now realize I can't get through my day or my life without spending a lot of time in the Psalms. And I think in some ways, Jim, your question is actually the big question. In what way does all this crisis actually end up driving us to new, deeper places in the Lord? And the Lord could actually be helping us to find that deeper place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it seems like the basics of our faith have enough meat to satisfy us.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, you could just take one. That reminds me that, don't you have a book out with your wife, the metrical Psalms, to sing the Psalms?
I do.
I wanted to plug that for you real quick, because I enjoyed that.
Yes.
To think about, even if we're just going to look at the 10 Commandments, to think about you shall not kill. And if you were to meditate on what that is about, and then you can really find the beauty of life and God's value and relationship for human people, et cetera, through a psalm. So it's not as if we have to make up or clench our teeth and strain harder. It's almost like we have to sit down and rest in what has been handed to us. That might be the foundation. The obedience and surrender to our faith and to the Spirit's movement would be a foundation for us to launch something, not as if we have to create something. Yeah. And that's what I love, that relationship between catechism and this present moment.
Amen. Beautiful said.
Maybe I should be asking questions. I do want to say, Dr. Tennent, I appreciate you mentioning just that there are times in our lives where we are not equipped, and God's going to give us capacity. The word you said is, I needed new capacity. And I think that's great for all of our listeners to hear, as we're talking about what we believe, but also the ways in which God can make that belief down deep in our soul.
Absolutely.
Well, anyway, I think even things like our children now are in their 30s, upper like 38 and 36. But I know when we first had our children, that's a sanctifying experience.
100%.
And so it shows that something that's a great blessing to you can also be a trial to you. And I know when I first became a pastor, I was shocked. Granted, I went to like maybe a little more Pollyannish. I was like, I'm going to get to go to this church. I'm going to be able to preach the gospel, and people will come forward and receive Christ, and their lives will be transformed. And this is going to be great. When I got there, and I had people that were complaining about the bathroom, the toilet wasn't flushing, and all this, and and I was like, what? It was just so like shocking to realize the kind of the just the challenge of the whole thing. And anyway, but it was great. I looking back on it, I see God's grace and all that, but it's hard. It is hard to walk in these situations where you have high expectations, and then you realize the reality can really be challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was thinking. No, I think there's not a day that goes by I don't walk into the office thinking not equipped. I mean, so I can't imagine feeling that way as the president of the seminary, but I think we all come into those
definitely
moments.
Definitely happens.
I like the fact that you've taken time. Let's go back to the Psalms. You've taken time to rest in the Psalms every day, just like with your wife, just taking time. And it's become this, you said, okay, at starting off, we're going to take 150 days, which is this long time. I mean, 150 days initially, and that's a long time. And I just kind of want to go back to some of the things we were saying about catechism and where it is, like in new membership stuff today. The early church did catechism in 1 to 3 years, like before their baptism. Do you think that as we look at a revival of sorts of catechism in Protestant and Wesleyan circles and what's coming in Methodism and whatnot, that we really need to sit back and say, we don't need to be rushing. Instead, we need to be resting in these truths and these important things instead of rushing through it? Maybe we do need to take time through this.
Yeah, it's a great question. Great point. I've been doing a little study on the question about time and how we think about length of time. So if you say, for example, if you're at a red light and the light is red, how long do you sit in a red light before you say, this has been read too long? Like, what is that length of time? Yeah. Or if you go to a movie and you watch a film, at what point does the film become too long, right? Mm-hmm. Like a film might be an hour and a half, but if it goes over 2 hours, it's like, that's too long. Or if you have if you sing a hymn in a church, how many verses is too long? Right? All right. And what you notice in the Psalms is, and we joke about 150 days, it actually was 157 days because it took us 7 days to get through Psalm 119.
Yeah.
So, whereas Psalm 117 is like, just bang, it's like, the shortest psalm in the book. So what you actually find is that God encounters us with different lengths of time. And I've wondered about the question about how much time would we think is appropriate to be catechized into the faith? Like how much time is the right time for someone to become introduced to the faith? And so people have expectations about all these things. How long is a meal? How long should a meal be? How long should a red light be? How long should, anything you can think of? We have already a preset time. And so part of the work of the church is to recalibrate our view of time. Like, how long is a sermon? How long should a sermon be? Mm-hmm. Those are really important questions. Sort of how people think about what to expect when they go to church. And now with the countdown clocks, if it's not done in 60 minutes, it's, quote, gone long. Well, in India, we regularly had service went 3 hours. People thought that was kind of normal. And so I do think, Brett, you're right. We have got the idea that catechesis has to happen in at the most 6 weeks of Sunday school classes or we're done, or one good night or whatever. And we have to see it more as a process over time. Mm-hmm. Over time. And really, in some way, the process that never ends.
Well, right. Absolutely. Right. J.I. Packer, in his book, Grounded in the Gospel, which is a fantastic book on catechism, talks about, if I can get this, pre-catechism, catechism proper, and then post-catechism. And so even divides it up in that sense, where your pre-catechism would be more like your evangelism and your kind of your alpha course or something like that. And your catechism proper would be that membership. And then post-catechism would be Sunday school classes and being, your service groups and those things that go on and on and on. So I know Packer was really really helpful for me in thinking in time in that sense.
That's a great point. And that's why I love the Alpha. And I think this is where Wesleyans could particularly be strong because Alpha, as you say, is a great pre-catechesis into introducing someone to the faith.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. In fact, there's no better success of any work in the Western world than Alpha. But the point is, and this is Wesley's point, there's a difference between becoming a Christian and being a Christian.
Yep.
Right. So what it means to become a Christian is one thing, but that's very different than being a Christian. So in some ways, the Alpha course is all pre-catechesis.
That's right.
And so in some ways, when someone comes into the faith, I think the pressure today is to say, well, okay, they've come down the altar, they've said the 3 or 4 questions that you asked them at the altar, you shake their hand, and that's it. And actually, that's just the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think we also got to think, I'm gonna semi-joke here, but think about the form of catechism, and you've done that. You've in your questions, like you said, you've changed up the questions in the format versus just a question and answer, much like the shorter catechism is. But I mean, here we are on a podcast, that is a catechism in the form of a podcast, and so not only do we think we have to recalibrate, how long should it be, and does our culture have a say in that, but the same way is what's the form of catechism too, because the mediums are endless right now, right? For how you can do that. But anyways,
well, I think your generation, I think, is been great on that. That's why I really respect all that y'all have done, including this catechesis podcast, because our generation tends to think in more traditional delivery methods, and your generation is much more creative. And also, what does it matter if you take something that would have been 6 hours that nobody would do, and you take it and you put it into smaller segments that people will do, you actually might find yourself having been more effective. So my hat's off to you for being the creativity y'all brought to all this. It's a
I also think, I mean, it's also about relationships too. And so I think, however a catechism is delivered or what form it is, I mean, if it's not done with the relationships in mind, it's like I'm in the middle of confirmation right now, and just thinking about how the students, they all learn differently, so they're not all built to sit down in a class to learn. And so we're trying to figure out, what are some different methods of talking about the importance, the important things of the faith. And so, but also just being in relationship with one another and taking time and pouring time into others. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Good for you.
So, as you have written this and other pieces that are very catechetical in nature, what's your favorite, if you have one, historic catechism? What has been one that you've read that just really has spoken a lot to you?
Well, when I came through seminary, we were required to study the longer and shorter Westminster Catechism, which of course is not in our tradition, but was the first time I'd really understood. I later got to know the Heidelberg Confession, which actually, because of the EUB, the union, that actually comes into our tradition. But so I was actually exposed to the very ones that you're looking at now in your podcast, that were very great. Of course, Luther's shorter catechism I was exposed to also in seminary. So I had the same exposures that all of you had in seminary. What it struck me though was that Wesley, as you know, he basically saw his canonical sermons and his notes in the New Testament as kind of the way to catechize pastors in their preaching and all that. And I don't know there's a lot of precedent for that. It's a pretty remarkable, to basically take the Nicene Creed, Apostles' Creed, out because he's afraid that it would become a dead letter. People just would recite doctrines. I think the point that, Brett, you made at the very beginning, people just reciting things. Yeah. And actually saying, let's take the content of the Apostles' Creed and embed it in sermons. The 44 canonical sermons is actually I think it's a fairly bold and I think unprecedented approach to catechesis, but it does show that Wesley saw catechesis differently. He saw it more embodied in communities rather than individuals. He saw it more embodied in something you proclaim, not just something that you recite again. So I think Wesley, with the class meeting and the band meetings both, I think demonstrated a very powerful catechesis model that basically the church did not do. They separated the life of the church and preaching of ministry from catechesis, and Wesley didn't do that.
Yeah.
So maybe we could learn from that. I don't know, but.
Well, you mentioning the boldness of Wesley, it always gets us when we come to his revisions in the Westminster Catechism, because it just makes us laugh, because sometimes it'll be a word that he takes out, or sometimes like our next episode, our regular episode, we'll be dealing with one that he completely just gets rid of because it has to do with sanctification, and so he's not going to let it stay in there if it questions sanctification. So he just boldly goes in and takes on the Westminster Divines and says, no, that's it.
It's funny because they're called the Divines, and Wesley's like, I don't care, you're wrong.
I know. Have you seen the publication where we have it with all the strikeouts?
Yeah, that's the one we use.
That's the one we use.
Well, we've got more response to that publication because we had two publications. One was that one. The other one was was Luther's preface to the Romans.
Yeah.
Because we talk to Wesleyans, of course, all over the world, and we say, what did John Wesley hear at Aldersgate? And they'll say, well, he listening to Luther's preface to the Romans. And we'll say, well, have you ever read Luther's preface to the Romans? Like, no. Nobody ever read it.
Yeah.
They just know it changed Wesley's life. So we published that preface. We got a lot of response from that.
And once you read it, you realize that the Holy Spirit must have been at work, because it's a very, very dense work.
I know. Well, I told JD Walt when they published the one that y'all are using with the strikeouts, I said, JD, that was pure genius, because JD is the kind of guy that can think of things like that. Yeah. I would have never thought of it. So people have really enjoyed that book.
Yeah, so fun. I messaged what's his name? Let's see,
Andrew Thompson.
Yeah, Andrew Thompson, who helped with this work. And I messaged him how we were enjoying it and using it. And he goes, I'm glad someone got it. So it was pretty fun.
I was noticing too here, I'm loving this resource that you just published. I want everybody to pick it up, Foundations of the Christian Faith.
We'll put it in the show notes, by the way.
Yes, without a doubt, with a link and everything. So some of your work from For the Body you have put over here. Mm-hmm. And you've got a sense of Christian human anthropology, Christian anthropology of the human person and relationships and sexuality and marriage and things of that nature. It's been kind of absent in not everywhere. And reading through both this segment of it and the book For the Body, you're quite ecumenical in researching that and allowing our wider Christian tradition to speak to us. So I just love to hear why is it so important for us to have a Christian sense of who human beings are?
Yeah, I think back to Alan's question earlier, I think the same point I would make is that catechesis has to be both historical and contextual. There has to be things that, like, doesn't matter if it's the 2nd century, the 7th century, the 21st century, whatever century, there's certain things that just are Christian stuff that need to be explored and learned and appreciated. But then there's things that are contextual to every generation that we're particularly challenged by. And obviously issues of personhood and having a really Christian view of the body is very, very important. And that affects, it has to do with sexuality, but also has things like, how we understand first-person violent killing in video games, how we understand things like the horrible shaming that goes on Instagram, where young girls feel shame because of bodily images are portrayed in our media in a way that sends certain messages to even very young girls about their bodies. And these are big theological challenges that every parent faces. You can't go through a grocery line with your children without seeing some glamour magazine that sends a message to a young girl about their bodies. And so this book tries to actually give permission for pastors to talk about it and help give some guidance on these type things. And so it's not trying to come in and solve all these problems, but just to lay some foundational points to be helpful. It's under ordinances because one of the points I make in my book For the Body, which is drawn from this a lot, is that the body is meant to be sacramental. Yes, and I think one of the things that the Wesleyan emphasis is that when we ask sacraments, which sacraments did Christ institute? Okay, Lord's Supper and baptism. But when you ask about the triune God, Wesley was very clear about that the means of grace flow from all three persons of the Trinity. The Father established marriage, for example. The Holy Spirit is healing bodies, is anointing us for ministry, all kinds of things. So I do think that there is a sacramental side of the body which needs to be today recaptured, including marriage and so forth, and move us beyond just looking through the Christocentric lens, but a more Trinitarian view of sacraments. I hope that's not too.
No, I love that. I think recognizing that everything we do in our bodies. Therefore, our bodies we need to know who we are, what we are. Bodies matter, are important, and we do have something helpful to say as Christians, because a lot of the language about bodies and interpersonal relationships and things of that nature that are kind of jammed out in people's faces are maybe so anxious or antagonistic or defensive that it's hard to talk about the beauty of what God does in human bodies, through human bodies, his incarnation for one, and how beautiful it is that we are people with bodies. And so I want to just let our listeners know, if this resource, this section in this book and Dr. Tennent's For the Body are, in my estimation, one of the few outside of the Roman Catholic Church's teachings, accessible, hopeful works there. So great resources for all of you. Mm-hmm. Also, did you, if I remember right, did you enjoy, was it Pope John Paul II's lectures on the human body? Did you study those as well?
I did. I read all of them.
They're great.
They published together as a book, male and female. He created them. So
yes, that's right.
And it's as someone took all those, and I love it. There is a little bit of humor there because, as you probably know, this was done over years. On every Wednesday homily, he did a 15-minute homily on the body for years and years and years. And it's now a book that's like 500 pages long. But there's a point in the book where there's a little asterisk and it says, we apologize that the Pope took, 3 months off of his homilies. We apologize, but he did have an assassination attempt against his life. Remember how he was shot? Poor guy had to. I thought, man, now there's that big pressure. You got to get back to your homilies now. He had this inconvenient assassination attempt. Other than that, he's doing fine.
What a lame excuse not to preach. Come on.
Everybody's trying to push deadlines.
Be ready in season and out of season. Come on, Pope.
Talk about the world's longest sermon series, too. I mean,
yeah, right.
I know.
Not giving up at all on that.
I think it was a 7-year series. I know, it's amazing.
I love it. Well, as we get ready to wrap up, and Dr. Tennent, we are so appreciative of your time. I just a couple questions I want to close with here for you. Just is what is your kind of great hope for the church moving forward? Those who are listening, most of the people listening are of Methodist and Wesleyan theological tradition, and know, like with the UMC and stuff that's coming up with us. But what is your great hope for the church moving forward? And then kind of a little bit different, how do you stay centered in your faith with all that's going on and all that you have to do? I mean, you write books. I don't know how you find time to write books and to run a seminary and to travel and to do all that you do. How do you stay centered in your faith with everything that is going on in your life?
Great questions. First of all, I when I was a young Methodist pastor, I went to annual conference every year, and the annual conference was always, at least for me, I was in the North Georgia conference, but I found it to be a very disappointing event, like the one I thought it could be or should be. I was expecting kind of like getting together and have these wonderful experiences and build these colleagues and all this, and I found it to be very dispiriting. And so I started just being gone. I went to India. I went to India every summer. I was just gone the whole summer in India. Which worked out well for me. My DS was okay with it. But what I found was that I gradually got introduced to the global church and what was God doing around the world. And I had the opportunity to see the church around the world. I think everybody in any denomination should stick their head up and see what God's doing globally in his church. Because every church, and I think on both sides, sometimes if you're UMC, you think we're the only ones going through crisis. But there are a lot of churches going through difficult times right now. but there's also a lot of really vibrant things happening all over the world that will just amaze you. And I found it really encouraged me. I've been to India every year from 1987 till the pandemic hit. And it was just so nourishing for me as a pastor to get out and see what God was doing. And I hope that the UMC, or those who, whatever happens after this, that we will recapture our great confidence in the church, not a denomination, but the church, the big church. Mm-hmm. Because ultimately, Christ did not say, I will build the United Methodist Church or the Global Methodist Church or the Presbyterians or any other. He said, I will build my church. Mm-hmm. So I've always wanted to be connected to that. As far as me personally, I mentioned earlier, I think probably one of the great strengths I have is that I do take time. I get up really early in the morning and I take time at the start of every day to be before the Lord. Mm-hmm. And to just spend time with the Lord in prayer. There's times I go through difficult times, of course, but we always consistently do that. Or actually right now ironically, Psalm 119, I mentioned that earlier, but we're in 119 right now. And it's just so powerful. I find it very moving. It helps me so much. But also I'm just so thankful for my wife. I have a wonderful wife. We've always gone through life together in a journey. She's very supportive, and we pray together, talk together. And thirdly, I think for me, our daughter lives in an extremely difficult, challenging ministry situation. She lives in central Tanzania for 12 years now. Wow. Where she lives, there are no roads, there are no stores, there's no running water, there's no electricity, there's nothing. If she wants to eat, she has to grow her own food. If she wants to get water, she has to go to the river and get it and bring it back. I mean, it's just her life is so challenging. And and she faces all kinds of opposition, it's a Muslim culture where she lives. And she's there to bring the gospel there, and she's translating the Bible into their language. But the point is that I think about what she goes through. And so every week she has to climb a mountain. She has to climb an hour hike to a mountain where she's found on one little rock she can stand and get a signal to call us. So she calls us every Sunday morning. And I just want to tell you, I find many times when I go through difficulty, I'm like, oh, this is so bad. The world's crushing upon me. I talk to my daughter and I feel like I am such a wimp, compared to what she deals with. And she does it with such joy and so I find that a lot of times God uses somebody in our life, like in a band meeting or I have close friends that I talk to every week on the phone that it's just so helpful. And I would encourage everybody in our listening thing to spend time in the Psalms or in prayer every day, and to spend time with close brothers and sisters in Christ that can help us in the journey.
Amen. Well, Dr. Tennent, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. How can people find you? Where you have a website? You have any social media handles? How can people find you?
Well, I do have a website, timothytennent.com. My name, timothytennent.com. It's Tennent. And there you have like all the sermons I preach, in Estes Chapel or in Florida, they're posted there, and things I'm writing or whatever. My blog is, you can sign up on there, and I put out a blog every week or two, and so that's there. I'm also on Twitter, Timothy Tennent on Twitter. I do things every so often. I try not to get into Twitter wars like that. I do post some pretty generic things there.
Oh, that's
so
funny.
Occasionally I'll Twitter something that, the fires of hell will be rained down upon me, but
and the good news is then all you got to do is log off.
That's it. That's right.
Log off.
Just be done.
You guys are the experts in social media. I'm not. It baffles me. You can say something that can really, really get people going.
Yeah, that's right. That is so funny. That is so funny.
I'm thankful for you joining us. I'm thankful. I just want to offer a plug too, and anybody interested in growing deeper in their studies in one way or another, maybe even pursuing ministry. Asbury Theological Seminary is a great place for it. I apologize, Alan, for that, but I'm in my second go around there, and it's a nurturing and beautiful community.
Yeah. I concur.
We'll link it in the show notes.
I concur. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Podecumens, our next episode, we're going to be dealing with the Westminster Shorter Catechism once again. We're going to be looking at the consequences of sin. So we've done the 10 Commandments. Now we're going to look at the consequences of breaking those 10 Commandments.
There's none, don't worry.
Wesley struck them out. No, I'm just kidding.
He's just straight.
No.
He bolded them, highlighted them. Anyway, but we're going to look at the consequences of sin. As a reminder, we're a part of the Spirit and Truth podcast network, and you can find out more about that at spiritandtruth.life. And we want to remind you about the Spirit and Truth Conference, March 17th through the 19th in Dayton, Ohio. And your Podechesis friends will be there. So we're excited about that. And we would hope to see you there as well. Hit us up on social media at Podechesis is where you can find us. Leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Any questions or comments, questions@podechesis.com is our email address. Dr. Tennent, thank you for joining us. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you, brothers. It's been a real honor.
Awesome. Until next time, Podecumens, y'all have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.